She set the cup down in front of the man with the dog and let her hand linger a half-heartbeat longer than usual. A small human pause that steadied Jonah at her hip and steadied herself. Scout nosed the rim. Daniel closed his fingers around the mug and exhaled slow, like a man releasing a tide he'd held too long. Inspector Mark Delaney folded his clipboard and looked at the scene with the weary steadiness of someone who files reports more than he judges people. "There's a report," he said, not sharp but heavy. "I filed it this morning. I don't want to be the one who makes trouble, Maya. I answer to things I can't change." A few heads turned. Someone swallowed. The room filled with the small noises that witness makes. Linda Hayes stood half in the doorway, lease papers clutched to her chest. Her hands trembled as if the papers themselves were hot. For a moment she reached for words and found nothing. The choice had already been written elsewhere. Maya checked Jonah with one look, then checked herself. She hesitated, the smallest crack in a long, steady line, then spoke with the quiet of someone who has kept faith longer than she has kept breath. "Scout is a certified service dog," she said. Delaney tapped the clipboard. "No visible documentation. I have to report a violation." Maya stepped forward, set another cup down in front of Daniel as if to underline the ordinary, and met Delaney's eyes. "He keeps this man steady. You don't take that away." She unpinned her name tag and placed it on the counter. Jonah's fingers tightened on the hem of his sleeve. The bell above the door chimed as she walked out. Small, final. She stood up. They fired her. Later that morning, a military convoy would roll into the neighborhood and everything would shift. If you believe kindness should never cost a person their dignity, stay with us. This story will show you why. She moves through the morning with the practiced economy of someone who has learned to make small mercies last. Seaside Grounds is warm in a way that looks ordinary. A scuffed wooden counter, a chalkboard that reads, "Heroes Hour, Wednesdays 7 to 9, a little shelf labeled Scouts Corner with water and fresh towels, and a community board plastered with flyers. Each item has a specific job. The Heroes Hour sign means anyone in uniform gets a free pastry and a quiet corner to talk. The paper and pen night flyer invites veterans to write letters to one another and to families. Skillshare. Saturday lists topics and the name of the volunteer who will teach them. Mechanics 1 week, resume clinics the next. These are practical things, not slogans. Maya moves through that map of small tasks. She steams milk until the hiss becomes a kind of metronome. Jonah draws a thin line of melody with his bow in the corner. Daniel arrives, slow and deliberate, scout pads at his heels, collar glinting. Maya sets his usual cup down and slides a biscuit within reach. The gesture is automatic, but the way she watches him relax when he takes it is careful and private. "You have your corner," she says, folding a napkin. "I have mine. We keep each other steady." A tourist at the counter fumbles with his phone, reading a postcard about the quiet table. "Why is that table singled out?" he asks, an edge of irritation in his voice. He does not mean harm. He simply does not see the grammar of this place. An older veteran looks up, a small crease forming at the corner of his mouth. Maya's smile is quick, her patience paper-thin for a second. She explains the point of the quiet table. No phones, low light, a sign that this is a space where someone can breathe without performance. And the man, mildly annoyed, shrugs and orders his latte without looking at the corner again. The moment is small, human, the kind of friction that keeps a community honest. Maya pins a fresh flyer to the board. Skillshare Saturday noon, bring a tool and learn with Joe. She presses it flat with a finger that trembles, not from fear, but from the weight of choices kept in her chest. Behind her, a stack of notices peeks out from the register, a lease reminder, an invoice with an overdue stamp. Numbers live in her pocket like bad weather. Keeping the lights on has become another form of service. The memory of Marcus is folded into the morning, not separate from it. As she reaches for a row of mugs, a line of light finds his framed photograph, and the voice she hears in her head is not a flashback so much as a companion. "Keep the doors open," he had told her, half joke, half command. "People will need a place to put their feet." She does not stop the rhythm to remember. She lets the memory shape the way she moves, gentle, exact, unshowy. Each program exists in small, tangible acts. During Heroes Hour, a veteran can buy a coffee and leave a note asking for a drive to a doctor's appointment. Volunteers answer the board's requests. Paper and pen night supplies stamps and envelopes. Someone helps mail a letter to a son stationed overseas. Skillshare. Saturday begins with a table of donated tools and a veteran who will teach how to change a tire, because being useful is a language many of them understand. These are the kinds of routines that put people back in their bodies, where routine is the scaffolding of recovery. Daniel rises to leave and offers to carry a box of donated supplies for the workshop. He does not offer charity, he offers usefulness. Maya accepts the help with the quick nod of someone relieved and proud at once. The bell over the door rings, and the room's tempo shifts, a subtle collective intake of breath. People look up, not in alarm, but in attention. The man at the counter straightens his jacket. Jonah stops playing for one beat and listens. A figure in the doorway holds a clipboard and wears the kind of tired that comes from filling out forms for other people's lives. Mark Delaney steps inside, and the ordinary choreography of the morning meets a different order, procedure, paper, and a decision that might not belong to them. The warm rhythm of the cafe hangs for a second like a held note. Then the air changes. He closed the clipboard with a sound that belonged to offices and forms, not to kitchens. Mark Delaney stood in the doorway like a man carrying paper weather. He was tired. You could read it in the soft lines around his eyes. He did not look for blame. He looked for boxes to check. "May I see the certification?" he asked, voice even. The words were official. The cafe quieted around them. Daniel's hands tightened on his cup. Scout shifted on the rug and rested his head against Daniel's knee. Jonah watched from behind the counter, small and alert. Maya felt the room lean in toward that question. "We keep the paperwork with Daniel," Maya said. She did not reach for a folder. She did not pretend someone had prearranged proof. That would have been tidy and convenient. Instead, she spoke for the man in front of her. "He's registered with the Service Animal Registry. If you need details, we can get them." Delaney nodded, not with triumph, but with the flat acceptance of procedure. "Policy requires visible certification during inspection," he said. "It makes my report routine. It makes the county auditor's job cleaner." He folded a pen and tapped the clipboard, as if the act might steady the world into its rules. "I don't make the policy," he added quietly. "I file what I see." A tourist shifted his bag and coughed. A woman at the corner table pressed a napkin to her mouth. Linda Hayes stood by the coat rack. The lease notice still folded in one hand. Her other hand trembled in a way that made the paper look heavier than it should. Daniel's jaw worked. His thumb rubbed the rim of the cup in a small, steadying circle, a gesture that read like habit, like training carried back from a place with louder noises. Maya saw him tighten and felt the familiar private alarm that told her when a memory was surfacing. Scout moved closer and laid his head against Daniel's shin, offering ballast. Maya stepped forward, palms flat on the cool wood of the counter, not to shove, but to make a line people could read. "He keeps himself steady with Scout," she said. "As someone who sees him every week, I can tell you this dog is not a disturbance. If the documentation matters to you, we'll get it. But asking him to leave doesn't make that paperwork appear." Delaney looked at her then, and for a moment, the badges of authority and the badges of loyalty measured each other. He flipped open his form and began to write. He wrote the time. He wrote the location. He wrote the observation. Owner asked to produce visible certification. Certification not presented at inspection. The pen slid across the paper with calm inevitability. There was a small set of sounds in the room. A spoon dropped. Jonah's breath held for a beat. A chair scraped farther back than usual. Maya's hand tightened around the edge of the counter so that her knuckles whitened. She had thought of this possibility, of the way rules and lives sometimes collided, and knew the ledger under the register already had numbers that could not be soothed by good intentions. She imagined the lease notice open on Linda's kitchen table, the way fear could make a signature seem heavier than a person's history. Delaney finished the paragraph and tore the page from the pad with a soft, precise rip. He did not look triumphant. He did not smirk. He tucked the page into a folder with the care of someone who believes in process. "I will file this," he said, voice dry. "It goes to administrative review. They will request follow-up documentation." The room seemed to breathe out. Daniel rubbed the side of his face and folded his hands. Scout let out a quiet, resigned sigh. Maya could see the line where training had taught him to contain the memory until the privacy of his own room. Delaney hesitated at the door, hand on the handle. He did not reach for an apology. He knew his role. He had walked it a long time. Instead, he said, with a softness that was not absolution but acknowledgement, "There are times when the system forces us into small cruelties." He did not look away from Maya, but he did not offer comfort. He turned and left, with the rustle of paper. Left in the wake of the clipboard, the cafe felt slightly unmoored. Jonah's fingers slipped from the counter, and he folded them into his lap. Linda pressed the lease notice into the pocket of her apron, like a talisman she was not ready to hand over. Daniel pushed his cup away and closed his eyes for one breath. The kind a man takes before he carries a memory back into the light. Maya bent and steadied Scout's head, the dog's eyes half closed and trusting. She picked up her name tag, fingers careful. When she set it on the counter, the sound was small and final. Jonah looked up at her the way a child looks to a parent about to step into a hard weather. She gave him a small, private smile that did not reach the tired line at her mouth. "We keep each other human," she said, softly and true. The words were for the room and for the ledger now making its slow journey through offices. They were a promise and a steadiness, the kind of thing that would be tested in the days to come. The office smelled of lemon cleaner and paper dust, decisions, and their leftovers. Linda Hayes closed the door and sat, smaller than usual, behind the narrow desk. A single sheet lay on top, a notice with the franchise letterhead and fines listed in neat, expensive ink. "They sent this morning," Linda said. If we're flagged, the penalties hit the contract. If the contract goes, the doors go with it. Her fingers worried the corner until the paper curled. I'm sorry, Maya. We can't risk the lease. Maya stood with her apron still tied, palms open. 10 years of mornings lined up behind her like cups on a shelf. I hear you, she said. No heat, no plea, just the weight of understanding. I won't make a scene. Linda's eyes flicked to the ledger taped inside a cupboard, to a stack of invoices poking from a folder. For one breath, her mouth opened as if another choice might step through it. Fear closed it. I tried, she said, almost to herself. I did. Maya unpinned her name tag. The tiny click sounded louder than it should. She folded the apron once, then again, edges straight, and set both on the desk, things cared for to the last. On the floor, the cafe quieted the way rooms do when they recognize a turning. Jonah stood by the register, hands flat on the wood. Daniel rose from his usual table, careful with the movement of a man whose balance is a practiced thing. Scout stayed tight at his boot. Linda came out behind Maya, the notice tucked into her apron like a hot envelope. She stopped before the counter, cleared her throat, and didn't find words. Maya picked up a cup she'd set aside and brought it to Daniel, steady as ever. Here, she said. Still warm. It was a small defiance, an ordinary kindness placed exactly where rules try to bite. Daniel accepted it with both hands. His face loosened a fraction. The way a knot gives when you find the right angle. You've given us somewhere to land, he said, keeping his voice low. Let me lift some of the weight back. He didn't reach for his wallet. He offered a list. A truck, a Saturday, a man who could fix a pipe, a call he could make. Usefulness, not charity. Maya met his eyes, squeezed his hand once. Thank you, she said. That's enough. Life tried to continue and couldn't quite. I know, Maya said. I won't fight you here. I'll find another way. She turned to Jonah. He had shifted closer, the violin case strap crossing his chest like a sash. He didn't ask. He looked, and that was question enough. She turned to Jonah. He looked at her, and that was question enough. Maya smoothed the hair off his forehead with a thumb that remembered every morning he'd sat in that corner practicing. Go get your bag, she said gently. We're heading out. Jonah nodded and returned with his violin case, a small knot in his brow. Scout lifted his head and laid it against Daniel's shin. Ballast and promise. Maya faced Linda one last time. No anger, no frost. Keep the lights gentle in the mornings, she said. The quiet helps. It wasn't instruction. It was care, passed on. Linda nodded, jaw tight. I will. Maya slid the folded apron across the counter to rest near the tip jar labeled Community Help. She set the name tag beside it where sunlight could touch the letters. Maya. Then she reached for Jonah's knapsack, slung it higher on his shoulder, and guided him toward the door. At the threshold, she paused and looked back, at the shelf with Marcus's photo and the metal catching a thin line of light. At the chalkboard that promised Heroes Hour on Wednesdays, at Scout's Corner with its bowl full of clean water, at faces she knew by their coffee and their stories. She let the room imprint itself one more time. Take care of each other, she said into the space. Not loud, not theatrical. They stepped out. The bell chimed, a soft, absolute sound. Sunlight met them on the small concrete step. Traffic hissed. A gull cried somewhere toward the water. Ordinary life moved, and so did they. They walked a few paces in silence. Jonah looked up, the question finally forming. Are we going to be okay? Maya held his gaze. The day reflected in his eyes. Sky, wire, the faint blur of a flag down the block. "We'll be all right," she said. It was not a promise of outcomes. It was a promise of effort. He nodded, small and solemn, and slipped his hand into hers. "We keep each other human," Maya said, low enough for him alone. Then they kept walking. They didn't start with signs. They started with calls. By mid-afternoon, Seaside Grounds should have been settling into its slow hours. Sunlight sliding across tabletops, spoons resting in empty mugs. Instead, the door kept chiming. Veterans drifted in, not marching, not chanting, just arriving. They ordered coffee, sat where they always sat, and tipped more than they needed to. Presence became its own declaration, steady, quiet, unignorable. But it wasn't perfect agreement. At the third table, a younger patron whispered, "It's sad, but rules are rules, right?" A retired Marine shook his head, slow and tired. "You ever serve?" The young man flushed and didn't answer. Nobody argued further. They didn't need to. Silence handled the rest, heavy but human. This was not a town chanting in chorus. It was a town clearing its throat, figuring out what voice it wanted to use. The spark? 17 seconds. A corporal at Camp Rowan had filmed Maya's last quiet act, handing Daniel that final cup. No outrage, no speech, just a woman doing right in a world that often rewards convenient wrongs. He posted it in the base group. "This is why we look out for each other." Comments stacked like salutes. Someone shared it to the spouses network. Another messaged a sergeant major who'd once thanked Maya after a deployment homecoming. Momentum rolled like a slow tide, not viral but inevitable. Across town, Maya sat at her kitchen table, head bowed over rent assistance forms and a folder marked Utilities. Jonah practiced scales softly in the living room, each note careful, like he knew loudness was a luxury today. The phone buzzed, and buzzed again. Maya flipped it face down. She poured herself tea and sat straighter, the way people do when dignity must carry them further than certainty. "We are okay," she murmured when Jonah paused. "We will figure it out." He nodded and played another note, fragile, determined. Back at the cafe, the first call hit Linda like a gust. Rosa Jenkins, retired Army nurse, voice like steel wrapped in Sunday warmth. "Call her, Linda. She's family." Linda rubbed her brow. "Rosa, I'm trying to keep us open. They can pull the franchise." Rosa didn't yell. She didn't need to. Places get saved two ways, by rules or by people. Guess which one brought us home? Call after call followed, some gentle, some sharp. "We stand with her. Don't let corporate fear run this town. She kept us alive after deployment. Now we keep her afloat." Then a different tone, terse, clipped, anxious. "Honestly? A business is a business. She broke a policy." A woman nearby hissed, "She didn't break anything except silence." But the doubt floated, unmistakable, human. No movement is spotless. Even loyalty has shadows. As afternoon stretched, two Marines swung by for coffee, left a card that read, "Respect is earned and returned." A high school coach pinned a note, "Skillshare still happening. My garage if needed." Someone dropped off a bag of groceries by the door. Someone else complained quietly about making a whole thing out of it. Community isn't a choir. It's a room full of voices finding harmony by accident. Then Linda's voicemail pinged, corporate tone sharp enough to cut glass. "We expect confirmation you upheld policy. Any reversal without documentation triggers fines." Pressure, clean and heavy as winter. Daniel appeared again near closing, scout at his heel. He placed a folded doctor's letter on the counter. "Proof," he said simply, "for when the dust settles." Linda held it like evidence and like apology. Evening slid in. Outside, streetlights clicking on, a flag stirring near the recruiting office. Inside, cups cooling, veterans lingering in quiet clusters, not storming, not protesting, just not leaving. Meanwhile, Maya rinsed a dish, wiped the counter, and helped Jonah tune one stubborn string. She didn't scroll, didn't check notifications building like a drum roll she refused to acknowledge. The world outside was gathering around her name. She didn't know. Not yet. She exhaled, tired, proud, scared, and whispered to Jonah again, "We keep each other human." And somewhere across town, a phone buzzed once more, unheard, carrying a message that would soon reshape everything. The kitchen table wasn't built for battles, but tonight, it carried one. Bills spread like a map of obstacles: rent, utilities, school lunches, a reminder about violin rental. Jonah worked on homework across from her, pencil tapping without rhythm. After a quiet minute, he asked, "Are we going to have to move?" Maya paused over the stack. Rent circled in red. Fear rose first, then discipline. "No," she said gently, "we're not losing our home." She didn't add, "if I can help it." Jonah nodded, but his pencil didn't move again. A knock. Scout barked once, familiar, and Daniel stepped in, toolbox in hand. He held a small grocery bag, too, but placed it aside, almost shy. "Heard about your faucet," he said. "Figured before it learns bad habits, I'd fix it." Jonah almost smiled. That alone felt like medicine. Daniel reached the sink, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who had learned to solve problems with hands long before the world invented forms. "You don't have to," Maya said. He checked a pipe. "I know. Doesn't mean I won't." He passed Jonah a wrench. "Want to help?" Jonah lit up, just a little. Maya let herself breathe. When the leak stopped, the drip giving up with a final metallic sigh, Jonah clapped. Daniel only nodded, as if taming faucets was as ordinary as tying shoes. On the table, Maya's phone buzzed again. She finally flipped it over. Local public radio. Request for interview topic: community, service animals, dignity. She stared at the screen, then at the overdue notices, then back to the screen. Jonah watched her too. He didn't say anything. He just looked, sensing the weight. Daniel set the wrench down. "Media?" he asked. Maya exhaled. "They want an interview." "Could help," Daniel said softly. "Could twist it too. And people would say I'm chasing attention." Her eyes drifted to the bills again. The arithmetic was louder than pride. Her thumb hovered over the message. For one breath, she imagined it. Her voice on radio, maybe help falling into place. A path. Then another image. Her story being turned into a banner. Her son hearing strangers speculate about their life. Some corporate PR person using her kindness to spin a policy memo. She put the phone face down. Not rejection, not acceptance, just postponement, powered by fear of being used and fear of being forgotten, tangled tight. Jonah touched her elbow, quiet understanding in 10-year-old form. Another knock. A familiar neighbor stood with a casserole tin, awkward and earnest. "Didn't know what to do," she murmured. "So, food." Maya blinked, surprised, grateful, embarrassed all at once. "You didn't have to." "Maybe not," the woman cut in, eyes gentle but direct. "But sometimes people should." Maya accepted the dish, hands steady despite her pulse. "That means more than you know." Behind them, a different neighbor muttered, I just think rules matter while passing the mailbox. Not cruel, just the world, uneven and honest. Daniel packed up. About that program, he said, tone lighter now. If you need someone to show folks how to change a muffler or change a mindset, I'm around. Maya almost smiled. I'll remember. He looked at the bills without looking directly at them. Pride's good, he said. Job's to make sure it doesn't starve you. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The thought sat between them. Dignity and survival don't always shake hands. Jonah tugged her shirt. We're still okay? Maya knelt to meet his eyes. So young, but learning grown-up storms before she wanted him to. We're figuring it out, she whispered. One step at a time. Daniel lingered at the doorway like he wanted to say more, but instead nodded once and whistled softly to Scout. See you soon. When the door closed, silence returned. Not empty, but taut. A room between breaths. Maya sat again. Looked at the casserole. Looked at the bills. Looked at the phone, screen black but glowing with possibility and danger beneath. Then she straightened the stack of envelopes and opened her laptop instead. Decision deferred. Courage saved, for when she could use it without losing herself. Jonah leaned against her shoulder. She placed a hand on his back, steady, quiet. Outside, headlights slowed near the house. Then another. A wave was forming out there. Not one she asked for, but one moving toward her all the same. Inside, she held the ground she could. Tomorrow would come. So would choices. The next morning arrived quietly. The kind of dawn that doesn't announce itself, just slowly replaces darkness with possibility. Maya hadn't planned to be at Seaside Grounds. She only walked past because Jonah wanted to drop a thank you card through the door. A small act. The kind of gesture children believe can sew a world back together. But as they rounded the corner, she stopped. The sidewalk was full. Not noisy, not chaotic. Full in the way a church fills before service. Rows of quiet, waiting breath. Veterans in jackets and caps. Neighbors with coffee and paper cups. A few unfamiliar faces standing near the curb, hands folded in front of them, posture alert but respectful. And then the low, distant hum. It began as a vibration in the pavement, a subtle tremor. Scout's ears flicked first, and Daniel lifted his chin, recognizing the sound before sight. Jonah's hand gripped Maya's coat. 3 Humvees rolled slowly down the street. Not roaring, not barreling, but approaching with the solemn pace of ceremony. Sunlight slid over the steel, glinting off insignia. Doors opened in unison. From the front vehicle stepped Captain Richard Gaines, dress blues pressed, ribbons aligned like a quiet biography. He wasn't flanked by cameras. He wasn't here to perform. He walked with purpose, every step measured like a man, carrying both authority and memory. He paused at the edge of the crowd. People parted, but no one cheered. Respect is not loud. Linda stood near the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, eyes red from a night spent balancing numbers and conscience. She didn't hide. She didn't speak. She just stood there, bearing witness to the moment she hadn't been brave enough to create. Captain Gaines approached Maya. He didn't smile first. He removed his cap, held it to his chest, and looked at her the way soldiers look at gravestones before they speak, with acknowledgement and weight. Maya Thompson. Her name sounded like it had already been written into a ledger somewhere. She swallowed. Sir, you stood up for one of ours, he said, and not because someone was watching, not for attention. You stood the way quiet people stand, firm enough that the room feels it. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a coin, heavy, engraved, edge worn from hands that had passed it forward before. A challenge coin, recognition of service, honor, and shared burden. He held it out, not dramatic, just steady. This is for recognizing service when others chose convenience. Maya looked at the coin like it might bruise her fingers. Jonah watched wide-eyed. Daniel bowed his head, Scout pressed against his leg. Linda blinked hard and looked down. "I didn't do anything grand," Maya whispered. "That's usually where real things happen," Gaines replied. He waited until she accepted the coin in both hands, not out of pride, but reverence. The metal was cool, weighty, honest. A quiet ripple of nods moved through the crowd. Not applause yet, just understanding. Gaines continued, voice lower. "I served with Marcus." The world stilled. Maya blinked. "You knew him?" "Good Marines," he said, voice gentled. "We don't forget who steadied us. Your husband did. And you've been doing the same here." There was no dramatic pause, no swelling music, just air, thick and living. "We're building a pilot program at Camp Rowan. Transition support skills, quiet mornings, coffee when needed, His tone was official and deeply personal all at once. "I want you to partner with us. This is not a job offer. This is trust. A recognition that community isn't built on credentials alone." Maya's breath caught. "I don't have certifications," she murmured. "I have a kitchen, a coffee pot, and ears." "That's a foundation," Gaines answered. "Experts can be hired, heart cannot." Linda closed her eyes. The truth landed on her shoulders like a verdict she already knew she'd earned. The silence that followed wasn't hesitation. It was reverence. A moment large enough for a life to shift inside it. Jonah squeezed Maya's hand. Daniel gave a short, proud nod. Scout's tail thumped once, a single drumbeat of approval. Maya looked at the coin again, the weight of Marcus, of mornings, of every quiet act that had never asked to be seen. She lifted her head. "I don't know how to do everything," she said. Gaines answered, "No one worth asking ever does. We build the rest." He extended his hand. Veterans didn't cheer. They stood straighter. One placed his palm over his heart. Another whispered, "About time." Maya shook the captain's hand, not triumphant, not trembling, rooted. The turning point wasn't explosive. It was earned. And everyone there felt the shift, like a flag quietly raised. Gaines replaced his cap. "Welcome aboard," Jonah beamed. Maya breathed in, a breath that tasted like possibility and memory and a future she had not dared to name. Linda wiped one cheek with the back of her hand. No one blamed her. But everyone had seen. The Humvees didn't roar away. They rolled back slow, respectful as they came. Before stepping aside, Gaines spoke once more, not to Maya, to the gathering. Communities stand strongest when they stand for their own. Heads bowed. Coffee steam rose in the cold air. Scout nudged Daniel's leg as if sealing the moment. Maya held the coin tight. A chance, not a punishment. A door, not a debt. And only then did the soft applause begin. Gentle, reverent. Enough to lift the morning without breaking it. If you believe a community should rise for those who quietly rise for others, share this story. Stand with kindness that doesn't need an audience. That afternoon, the street had calmed, but the morning still felt warm on the brick. Maya and Jonah were about to turn away when Linda stepped into the doorway. "Maya, a minute?" In Linda's palm lay the name tag, cleaned, the letters bright. Maya. I let the fear of losing this place blind me, she said. No theatrics, just breath and truth. I forgot the people the rules are meant to protect. Maya waited. Jonah stood back, reading the room. I'm not asking you to come back as manager, Linda continued. I'm asking to make amends, and to help you do what Captain Gaines asked. Maya's brow tightened. Say it plainly. Seaside Grounds will host the pilot, Linda said. Camp Rowan brings resources and counselors. You lead it. Here, I'll cover the back room, coffee, basic supplies, and a small stipend so you're not volunteering yourself into debt. No strings. This isn't a second job. It's the platform for your partnership with the base. The distinction landed cleanly. Not 2 lanes. 1 lane, wider. Maya glanced at the name tag. I won't wear that again. It's not for your apron, Linda said. It's for the shelf. They stepped inside. The cafe looked the same and not the same. Tables, light. The photograph of Marcus above the bookcase. Linda set the tag beneath it. Centered. Not a title. A marker. She feared the ledger more than the life within. The thought passed through Maya. Not accusation. Recognition. Linda's mouth tightened, then softened. When the market crashed years ago, I lost more than money, she said. Just that much. And let the rest stay in the room without details. Maya nodded once. Backroom's yours on weekdays, Linda said. I'll brief the staff and handle vendors. If corporate calls, they speak to me. And if they object? Maya asked. They object to me? Linda answered. Not to you. Silence, brief and steady, the kind that repairs. Maya looked toward the door where the morning's crowd had stood, toward the corner where Daniel usually sat, back to the shelf where Marcus watched the light change. Then she faced Linda. Then help us keep it a home, Maya said. Gladly, Linda replied. Maya reached for the envelope in Linda's other hand, checked the amount with a quick practical glance and slid it away. We'll track every dollar. We'll run it clean. I expect nothing less, Linda said. Here's the core of it, Maya added. Concise now, building the agreement where both could see it. Camp Rowan partners with us. Seaside Grounds hosts. We start small. Peer meetups, quiet mornings, skill shares. We coordinate with counselors when they're available. I won't be what I'm not. I'll be what I am. And we'll add expertise around it. That's the plan, Linda said. And if anyone asks why here, I'll say because this is already where they come. Maya extended her hand. Linda took it. A pact, not a contract. From the sidewalk, the late sun threw a warm bar across the shelf. Marcus's photo, the medal, the name tag, ordinary objects now carrying a new assignment. Tomorrow, Maya said, letting go of Linda's hand. I'll bring chairs into the back room. Coffee urn, sign-in sheet. We start. I'll have the key ready, Linda answered. They stood a moment more, neither explaining the past nor forecasting the future. It was enough to mark the present with a clear line. The cafe would be the front door of a partnership, not the scene of a mistake. Maya turned to go. Linda stopped her gently. Thank you for letting me do this differently. Thank you for choosing to, Maya said. Then she and Jonah stepped back into the afternoon, the glass door settling behind them with a soft kiss of hinges. Inside, the name tag stayed where Linda had placed it, not calling Maya back to a role she'd outgrown, but anchoring the work she was about to begin. The work is not rescue. It is showing up day after day. Maya unlocked the back room before sunrise. She set chairs, cracked the window, left the door ajar. Coffee breathed in the air. Scout settled by the threshold like a quiet sentry. The first morning, one veteran came. He poured, sat with his back to the wall, and said nothing. Maya didn't fill the silence. She asked if he wanted the window open or closed. Cracked, he said. That was enough. By the second day, there were two, because Daniel arrived with a man who'd been sleeping in his car. They fixed a sticky hinge on the way out. The hinge worked. So did the morning. The bureaucracy gathered like weather. Emails asked for outcomes in tidy boxes. A grant form wanted deliverables before the door had its first scuff. At night, after Jonah slept, Maya skimmed training modules, highlighted boundaries, and learned what not to promise. She kept the laptop brightness low and her expectations honest. The first quiet circle drew 3. They sat 20 minutes without introductions. When the timer chimed, a veteran with sleeves pushed to the elbow cleared his throat. "I can't do churches anymore," he said, eyes on the floor. But this felt close. No advice followed. Daniel nodded once. The man's jaw softened like a knot remembering how to be rope. A VA counselor visited, brisk, precise. She moved a chair, pointed to the urn. Not between people in the exit. She counted seats. 8 is better than 12. She looked at Maya. "You can't do therapy, but you can hold space." "Then I will make the space safe," Maya said. Saturday's Skillshare was small, but alive. Daniel laid out a few tools. A veteran taught 2 simple checks for a car that won't start. A kid from the block practiced until he got it right. No speeches. Purpose showed up in the way hands remembered work. The pushback showed up too, focused, opposite pressures that squeezed the room from both sides. From outside, a post that read, "Good heart, wrong role. Where are the credentials?" It was blunt, widely shared, and not entirely unfair. From above, a message from a state funder for renewal, provide KPIs, attendance growth, ER visit reduction, employment outcomes, quarterly, standard format attached. Maya read both twice. Then she looked at the sign-in sheet, 3 first names, a coffee ring, a smudged star Jonah had drawn in the corner. Outcomes were happening in inches, not columns. By week 2, the morning routine had a pattern. 2 arrived, then 4. 1 stood near the door for a long time, and at last sat. Another traced the grain of the table with a finger until his hand stopped shaking. Someone whispered, "Thanks," on the way out, as if gratitude might spook if spoken too loud. The second quiet circle brought the first story in full voice. A man with a clean fade and rain-colored eyes spoke about listening to ice machines at 3 a.m., about running out of ink making a list of safe places. He stared at the floor. No one tried to fix him. Maya slid the tissues closer and watched his shoulders drop a fraction at the mercy of being heard. She met the counselor again, this time with questions. How to refer without breaking trust. How to set limits without shutting doors. The answers were practical maps. A warm handoff, crisis numbers printed and discreet, a phrase to end a too long share. Let's pause here and breathe. Maya wrote it all down. The counselor squeezed her arm. People are choosing the room. That matters. In the middle of a noon session, Maya's phone buzzed with the KPI request again. She silenced it and felt the tug. Fear of failure if she ignored it. Fear of losing the room if she bent to it. She imagined rewriting people into percentages and decided to translate instead. Headcount, yes. Referrals made, yes. But also a line that said no one left early today. That afternoon, 3 women in service caps lingered to stack chairs. "We brought a friend," one said. nodding toward the hallway where a newcomer hesitated. "She doesn't talk much yet." Maya smiled. "She doesn't have to." Jonah taped simple labels to a shelf: chairs, filters, pens, a child's supply chain. He checked the window latch the way Daniel had taught him, proud of the click. At dusk, Maya walked the perimeter alone. The room held the day's heat and the soft imprint of bodies that had finally settled into chairs. She wiped a coffee ring from the sign-in sheet and saw the names underneath come back into focus. She thought of the post about credentials, of the spreadsheet waiting in her inbox, of the door cracked just enough for air and exit. Then she left the lamp on low, placed a fresh box of tissues within reach, and set the urn where no one would have to pass it to get out. Tomorrow at 6. The first footsteps would sound in the hall, Scout would lift his head, and the door would open the way it had today, on time, without fanfare. The work would keep being this: a room ready, a chair empty and meant for someone, a silence that doesn't ask for a performance. Showing up, day after day. Growth didn't arrive like thunder. It seeped in, steady as dawn. A small non-profit filmed a quiet piece on seaside support. Hands-on mugs, chairs sliding, Daniel showing a simple fix. A woman laughing for the first time in months. No narration, no swelling music. 3 days later, the county council shared it. A week after that, the state veterans office reposted, "Community first, always." One morning, a black SUV idled at the curb. A state representative stepped in, no entourage. "I want to see what you're building," he said. He toured the back room. Veterans nodded without standing. 2 soldiers in off-duty hoodies, from Camp Rowan, refilled the urn and stacked cups. Rosa, name badge now reading VA Liaison, Camp Rowan, adjusted the circle to 8 chairs just as she'd taught. "This isn't a program," the representative murmured. "It's a place to land." "Landing counts," Maya said. He nodded. "It does, and it can scale." As he turned to leave, Rosa added one clear line, so no one missed it. "I'm here from Camp Rowan as your VA liaison. I'll coordinate counselors, protocols, and referrals. You keep the room steady. I'll keep the system aligned." Invitations followed. A county panel, a regional VA roundtable, a state conference where Maya stood at a thin podium and spoke about rooms, not heroes. "We don't fix people. We hold a room long enough that they remember they're not broken." The hall didn't cheer. It recognized. Recognition came with strings. A consulting firm proposed to package and replicate seaside support statewide, naming rights included. They attached a mock logo and a glossy timeline. Maya read it twice, pushed the laptop away, and wrote back, "The soul is not for sale. We grow on human terms or not at all." An hour later, a follow-up. "Without brand alignment, our sponsorship is not viable, cost, immediate, and real." She updated the spreadsheet. A line of funding vanished. Supplies would have to stretch. She stared until the number blurred, then closed the lid and set chairs. Another pitch came, softer. A national morning show wanted a heartwarming segment. The producer's beats were tidy. Single mother, fallen husband, beloved veterans, labels for people still breathing inside them. Maya replied with a different list: dignity, privacy, consent, no staged tears. They passed. Another cost. Visibility traded for integrity. The real tests lived in rooms where rules sit. At a policy hearing, badges beeped and papers rustled. Maya sat between a VA director and a county commissioner. Captain Richard Gaines stood along the wall, hands behind his back. There to signal Camp Rowan's support wasn't ceremonial. It had a spine. Then Mark Delaney stepped to the mic, the inspector whose report had once cost a job. Uniform pressed, voice even. He read, "Updated county guidance on service animals. Visible certification is not the sole standard. Context, including veteran status and clinical need, must be weighed. Discretion and dignity required. Paperwork serves people, not the other way around." A pause. He met Maya's eyes. Not an apology, an amendment. Outside the chamber, a reporter asked, "Does today feel like victory?" Maya thought of quiet circles, the scrape of chairs, a soldier from Rowan lingering by the door until he finally sat, Jonah taping labels on the supply shelf, Rosa counting chairs to 8, Daniel's palm steadying a shaking shoulder, Linda keeping the lights low at dawn. "Victory?" she said. "No, it feels like we made room." Back at Seaside Grounds, the work kept its small pulse. 2 active-duty soldiers from Rowan signed in with first names and no ranks. A woman set her phone face down and watched the window until her breath matched the room. Scout sighed and settled by the door like a living welcome mat. Emails still pressed. One from the state funder, KPI reminder, attendance growth, ER reductions, employment outcomes, quarterly. Maya typed numbers where numbers belonged. Head count, referrals, then added a plain line at the bottom. More people stayed the whole hour. An anchor against abstraction. That evening, the nonprofits clip played on a county screen. The camera found the framed challenge coin on the wall, and beneath it, Jonah's careful note, "Welcome back when you're ready." The audience was quiet in the right way. On the same night, a donor rescinded a tentative pledge, citing lack of brand clarity. Linda closed the email and brought over a case of filters she'd paid for herself. "We'll be okay," she said. It wasn't bravado. It was a plan. Fewer frills, tighter lists, the room intact. Maya stood in the doorway as people drifted out. Rosa locked the cabinet. The Rowan soldiers stacked chairs. Daniel flipped the sign to closed and left the door cracked an inch while the last woman tied her shoe. Exit visible. Pressure low. Scale had arrived. It hadn't changed the work. The work was still this: a chair open, a cup warm, a door eased, a room that does not ask for proof before compassion. Outside, the flag near the recruiting office snapped once in the night air. Inside, the coin caught a thin line of light. Maya straightened the frame with 2 fingers, not as ceremony as maintenance, and let the room settle around her, ready for morning. A year later, dawn arrives the same way at Seaside Grounds. Quiet first, then warm. On the shelf, a framed photo of Sergeant Marcus, the challenge coin in a plain frame, and Scout's collar brass plate engraved Seaside Honor. It rests there now. He slipped away in the spring, a long good life, a job done well. The work didn't become a spectacle. It became a pattern. Seaside Support now runs at 3 nearby bases, each room adapted to its people, but held to the same promises. Peer-led, privacy first, no staged tears. Rosa comes in with her badge, VA Liaison Camp Rowan, and says the line she's repeated all year. "I'll translate care into columns. You keep the room steady, I'll keep the system aligned." KPI sheets go in cleaner. The room stays human. Early in the year, Captain Richard Gaines stopped by in uniform. No cameras. Set a brief commendation letter on the counter and said, "Command stands behind this work." He saluted Daniel, shook Maya's hand, and left before the room could thank him back. Quiet recognition from inside the house. A small non-profit short film traveled farther than expected, and a state invite followed. At a national convening, Maya stood at a slim podium and kept it plain. We didn't invent care. We made a place where it could find the door and sit down. That was enough. Offers came, bright and complicated. A publisher pushed a contract big enough to solve a year of bills, if they owned the story. Maya capped her pen and wrote back, "Keep the rights with the community, or I pass." They passed. A different cost came when she refused a consulting firm's package and replicate plan. An email pinged back. "Without brand alignment, our sponsorship is not viable." A month of supplies vanished with that sentence. Linda shaved the budget and bought filters herself. Integrity stayed, frills didn't. Not all attention helped. An op-ed doubted well-meaning amateurs. Before the next session, Camp Rowan's Public Affairs issued a brief note. Outcomes supervised by licensed clinicians, delivered through a peer-led partnership. Gaines added one line of steel. Competence is verified in results and in how we protect our own. The room filled on schedule. The work held. Life, meanwhile, kept its smaller circles. On Tuesdays, Quiet Circle still begins with 20 minutes of shared silence. On Saturdays, Skillshare rotates. A resume clinic with Rosa's checklists. Simple carpentry with a corporal who can teach a level to tell the truth. Active duty soldiers from Rowan sign in with first names and no ranks. A woman sits near the door until the second week, then chooses the center chair. Progress happens in inches you can't photograph. At the local school, Jonah reads an essay titled, "The Door Was Never Locked." He thanks the people who keep the lights gentle and the exit visible. When he reaches the line about his father. "A man I know from stories and from what my mother chose to do with both." He pauses, breathes, and finishes clear. Maya doesn't wipe her eyes. She watches him set something down where it belongs. On a gray morning in November, the back room fills early. A young veteran stands at the threshold, backpack high, scanning exits the way training teaches. Daniel crosses slowly, palm open. An invitation, not a push. "Seats open," he says. She sits. When circle ends, Daniel turns the challenge coin in his hand, a year of thumb-worn brass, then presses it into hers. "Someone trusted me with this," he says. "Today I am trusting you." The room understands the ceremony without a speech. That afternoon, a reporter asks Maya if the past year feels like victory. She thinks of coffee rings wiped away, of Rosa counting chairs to 8, of Jonah's labels on the supply shelf, of Linda keeping the lights low at dawn, of soldiers and veterans choosing a room over isolation. "Victory?" she repeats. "No, it feels like we made room." Near closing, Maya straightens the coin's frame by a hair's width. She polishes Scout's collar until the letters catch a thin line of gold from the window. She sets out tomorrow's sleeves, one neat stack. Outside, a truck passes and throws a brief Humvee silhouette across the front glass. An echo now, smaller than it once felt, receding down the street. "Mom," Jonah asks as they lock up, "did you ever feel scared?" "Every day," Maya says, "but we kept showing up." He nods, as if that is enough map for what's next. Morning will come the way it always does. Maya will turn the key, crack the window, set 8 chairs, and leave the door eased an inch so there's always a way in and a way out. First names will meet a blank line. Coffee will breathe in the air. The room will be ready for whoever needs to remember that they are not alone. Justice is not a verdict. It is the returning of dignity. If this story touched you, subscribe and share. And today, offer presence to someone who carries invisible weight. Justice begins with human eyes meeting human hearts.